Were it not for its 2022 model year, I could have easily seen the Genesis G70 as being the kind of car that I would expect to see in a game like Gran Turismo 5 or 6, tucked away in some little dealership that's easy to overlook and lost in the shuffle of the 1,000+ cars that are in the game. The funny thing is though, even with a lot less cars in the game, it's still kind of easy to forget about this one. The craziest part is, even if you go into the dealership, it's easy to forget about it because the Group 4 and especially the Group 3 versions are actually pretty striking. They're very good looking race cars and they have pretty cool liveries as well. We're going to talk about those in future also, but for now we're talking about the road car. This is the one of the three that, for obvious reasons, but unfortunate reasons, is the easier one to overlook, but it actually brings very healthy numbers to the table. Because, for one thing, this car has 366 horsepower. It's not breaking the bank, it's a similar kind of area to what a Kia Stinger GT would have in the game. Of course, a natural rival of this car in real life, and it's a pity that that vehicle isn't in the game, to be honest. I like those more than these. But this does have some key advantages over your more typical choice of sports saloon, such as, for example, four-wheel drive, and it's turbo-aspirated. So it has some pretty nice tuning parts to its name as well. That initial 366 horses can be taken up to around 670. That is much more healthy to be working with, and even with a stage 1 weight reduction, you can take the already fairly expected but not too heavy 1,815 kilos or 1.8 metric tons immediately down to more like the 1,500 region. Well, already you've now got yourself a supercar rivaling machine, at least on paper, with that advantage of four-wheel drive. Now, a lot of people don't like four-wheel drive, a lot of self-proclaimed purists, many of whom haven't driven that many performance cars anyway in real life, but rear-wheel drive does have a certain appeal to it from a fun factor point of view. But in the game, let's be honest, a lot of the time four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive comes in real handy. Bad weather, off-road ability, there are a number of key advantages to it, and also just ease of use. It's a natural fact that four-wheel drive cars are more forgiving. It's one of the best things about them. But also, it's easy to overlook this, but you really do get the best of both worlds when you factor in a torque vectoring center diff, because you can take it from a 50-50 all-forgiving Audi TT style monster to a car that's basically a 10-90 split and about as close to being rear-wheel drive as you can get out of the platform. So a dual personality, if you will. And for a price tag of only 56,000 credits, which is peanuts in Gran Turismo 7, you get in a car which has a point level of only 511 to begin with, and the one that I tuned after driving this stock version in the video, with around 670 horsepower and around 1,500 kilos, and racing hard tyres, suspension, gearbox, clutch, and a number of other things, was still just under 700 points. So in other words, eligible for example, the Cash Cow event at Le Mans, as well as a ton of other events as well. A 670 horsepower all-wheel drive super saloon, that's quite the appealing option to go up against more obvious and more popular picks. Now, it might not be as quick as some, but at least in a straight line this thing should be a monster, and I definitely do get a mixture of Kia Stinger, obviously, but also the Infinity Eau Rouge edition, that I believe it was a one-off concept with a Nissan GT-R engine, which was an awesome idea, but this definitely gives me those kind of vibes. The natural question is then, how does it actually drive? Well, first of all, let's talk stock, because stock, I will say this car's all-wheel drive, or four-wheel drive more accurately, setup feels a little bit Subaru Vision GT-ish for my liking. It's not quite that bad, but it definitely feels more like a 60 front, 40 back kind of all-wheel drive car, wherein it's closer to feeling that front-wheel drive kind of torque, steer and pull when you really give it the beans out of a corner. So a little bit of tuning, a little bit of a change with the differential, and especially that torque vectoring center diff can do a world of change to that, as well as tyres, etc. But it's certainly not bad off the bat. It's very forgiving, it's just quite heavy when you really boot it out of a corner. Nothing that you can't cope with. I will say though that at least stock, the primary issue with the car is actually that it's very unstable under high speed braking. when you really slam on the anchors from up around, say, 140, 150 miles an hour, say, for example, here at Bathurst, when I slammed on the anchors toward the end of the lap, after the long straight and that curve round to the right, it really wanted to lose control. And if you just slam on the brakes and let it plough into the corner as you usually would, realistic or not, the car really does not respond well. It will suddenly jackknife to the left or right, the front end will dive in, the back end will overtake itself, and you'll end up losing control. Which is kind of surprising for a four-wheel drive, relatively heavy, fairly long car. Usually those things give you more stability, especially when it's not really dealing with a ridiculously high amount of power. It feels to me almost like what you'd get when you tick all the right boxes, but then you don't really set it up in the right way. It's almost like Genesis built a car that had all things that sound good, but then maybe didn't actually employ somebody to put those things together in a fully cohesive way. I'm not saying that as a slight to the real car, because that's just how it's presented in the game, but as I've talked about on the channel before, racing games do have a lot of power when it comes to making you think a certain way about a certain car. I mean, I bought my first car literally because of a game, so the marketing power there is immense. If it does handle like this in real life, that could be a bit disconcerting at high speeds, certainly on a track day, but at least in the game, that is how it feels. Now, I will say it's easy to overlook this car in favour of the racing versions. The Group 4, the Group 3, they are stunning looking cars, and we'll talk about those in future. For now though, I would say that if you haven't tried out this car, it is worth a look. The G70 is a deceptively good little package, it's not overly expensive, and even though I'm not going to say it's, a world-conquering, unstoppable monster that you just happen to have not thought about using before, it's definitely a car that might be capable of more than you may have given it credit for. With that kind of power, reasonable weight, and the four-wheel drive advantage, well, those three things alone, when tuned, especially within a 600 or 700 point limit, you could find yourself using something of a four-door Nissan GTR, as crazy as it may sound. So overall, that's it for my thoughts on the G70. Of course, drop yours down below. Do you like the car? Do you use this one maybe a lot? Do you maybe surprise people in online lobbies with it? I could definitely see that happening. It is something of a sleeper. But either way, let me know. And of course, stick around on the channel for more reviews. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.